The PlayStation 5 is absolutely dominating right now. It's one of the coolest consoles ever, both socially and technically. When people think of next gen, they think of PS5, but that might not necessarily be a good thing. Sony has made some questionable moves so far this generation. The increase from $60 to $70 games, not giving us free upgrades on first-party cross-gen titles when they said they would, launching PlayStation Plus Premium and then seemingly forgetting about it, remastering games that honestly don't need it and charging full price, and raising the price of your console while simultaneously announcing that you just had your most profitable year ever. It's not enough to break them, but it does leave a questionable taste in people's mouths. But the one thing Sony does right is they make some good games. Hello world and all who inhabit it, it is I, the Great Sayran, and do you really need a PS5? I've had a PS5 since day one, and though I couldn't imagine my gaming setup without one, it can be hard to recommend most people make the jump, especially if it's going to put them in a tight spot financially. Here's why. The PS5 can be hard to find, and until recently, most people thought they didn't even exist. I've had friends buy PCs, Nintendo Switches, Xboxes, all because they couldn't find a PS5. Sony is looking to change that though, but there are some lasting effects from the initial chip shortage which led to the PS5 rarity. Mainly being that most of Sony's games are cross-gen at this point, with performance ranging from good enough to pretty good. This in turn delays the big jump from PS4 or PS4 Pro to PS5. Now I didn't have a PlayStation 4, so the PlayStation 5 was my way of jumping back into the PlayStation ecosystem. But compared to my friends with PS4s, it can be hard for me to explain to them why they actually need a PlayStation 5 right now. Now I'm not saying that people shouldn't go out and buy a PlayStation 5. If you have the money and it's available, grab one. But if you had to break your back for it financially, just wait a second. Over the past 2 years, I've noted 3 key differences that to me set the PS5 apart from its main competition, the PS4. The first one is pretty obvious, being the actual features and tech inside this thing, with my favorite being high refresh rate gameplay. This is an absolute game changer. God of War Ragnarok, a game that totally didn't have to be, is playable at 1080p 120 frames per second. That is some smooth gameplay. I have a 4K TV, but that's a TV my wife mainly uses. And my monitor and my gaming setup is only 1080p but supports 144 Hz. When I saw God of War was going to be playable at 1080p 120 on the PS5, I was excited because that meant 2 things. 1, I wouldn't have to share the TV with my wife and potentially lose an arm in the process. And 2, I can get an experience that I truly hadn't had before, even if it wasn't a 4K 60 option, which would have been the best of both worlds. Most of the AAA games I play cap out at 60 frames per second, since even the most powerful of rigs really only manage to get double-digit frame rates unless you're using something like DLSS. Most of my triple-digit frame rate gaming comes from things that are less intensive like indie games, or they come from shooters which are really built for triple-digit frame rate gaming. And those usually don't have much when it comes to a single-player experience. To be able to experience Ragnarok at 120 frames per second is a compelling reason to upgrade, since the base PS4 only offers the game at 1080p 30 frames per second and the PS4 Pro at a maximum of 1440p 30 frames per second. If you're someone who's sensitive to frame rate like I am, then it's a no-brainer to make the jump. But there are many people out there who really can't tell, so adding a resolution and frame rate bump doesn't mean as much to them, especially since a lot of games recently have been stuck at 30 frames per second and they probably haven't even experienced 60 frames per second that often, let alone 120 frames per second. Moving off the technology and talking more about the features of this thing, I love the DualSense controller. It feels great, and if the devs really take advantage of its features, games can really pull you in and immerse you in their world. It does make a huge difference, but even I can't justify making the upgrade solely for the controller. Performance and features are important and go beyond marketing, but to the average consumer, they may not even notice. So maybe the games themselves will help them make the jump. The PS5 has some amazing games, but only a small few of them aren't also on the PS4. My favorite of these being Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Insomniac carried Sony in 2020 and 2021 with Spider-Man Remastered, Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Only Ratchet & Clank was PS5 only, but they all had PS5 versions I played and enjoyed. Even then, the game wasn't necessarily a system seller, and as fun as it was, it still wasn't that game that made me feel like next gen was here. Returnal seems fun, and I had been meaning to play it, especially since I have PlayStation Plus Premium for no reason, but it really didn't catch my attention. It was a PS5 only game, but seemingly only for the controller technology because it didn't play like anything the PS4 couldn't handle. Demon's Souls is a remake of a PS3 game, so it got a facelift and a frame rate bump, but do you see my point? No must-play games only on the PlayStation 5. There are PS5 versions of games I really enjoy, but it doesn't seem like there's a compelling reason to buy a PS5 right now, especially if you already have a PS4 or PS4 Pro. If Sony wants to sell more PS5s beyond the initial hype, they just have to get more games exclusively for the PS5. There are some great looking titles like Stellar Blade and Rise of the Ronin, but one of those is slated for 2024 and the other one is slated for 2023, but could easily slip into 2024 since we don't have an official release date. 2023 is getting kicked off with Forspoken, which is a PS5 exclusive from Square Enix, which looks amazing, but also Hogwarts Legacy is coming a few days later, is cross-gen, and it has infinitely more hype. I mean, which would you rather play? I do think the PS5 is winning in some specific areas. Their commitment to accessibility this generation is very refreshing. I'm not disabled, but even I can appreciate the slew of accessibility options given to you when you first boot up God of War Ragnarok, for example. Their commitment to accessibility is so great that they went back and remastered a remastered game just to give it accessibility options that they couldn't before, and charge you $70 again for something you got for free when you bought your PlayStation 5. Such a great company. Anyway, for every good thing they do, they also do something terrible like PlayStation Plus Premium. They launched this service in June of 2022 with promises of PS4 and PS5 titles on the extra tier, and for more money you can get access to Sony's retro catalog on their premium tier along with some other benefits we really haven't used. They have really only given us PS3 games, which are cloud versions. They're serviceable. I mean, that's how I replayed all of God of War before God of War Ragnarok, but I'd much rather have them natively, and if that's not possible, at least give me more PS1 and 2 games for the $120 a year you're charging me. PlayStation Plus subscribers are down, but the overall revenue they're bringing is up. So I don't even know if Sony cares enough to change this, but premium is a joke, extra has the most value. Going into the third year for the PS5, this is the thing that I want changed the most. I love having the option to pay a monthly fee and play a bunch of games that I normally wouldn't have access to unless I waited on a major sale or discount. There are a few other issues with PlayStation currently, but depending on who you are, you might not find those egregious. But we can all agree that The Last of Us didn't need to be remastered. Again, Sony has had some bad PR lately, but honestly, I'm still loving my PS5. Recently, I've had several friends ask me whether or not they should grab one. Some that don't play games at all, and some that have had every single PlayStation console ever, but are still holding off on this one. This console is especially popular riding off the hype and success of the PlayStation 4. I can't say whether or not for you specifically to upgrade, but if you have the money and it's available, go ahead. Sony is trying to bring more titles to the platform just like Xbox and Nintendo. They're all doing a great job, but for now, God of War Ragnarok is calling my name, Spider-Man 2 is looking at me nasty, and Wolverine got my bubble bath ready with some Hennessy. Yeah. Did you already make the jump to PS5? Let me know down below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.